advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. And of course, welcome back. That's right. It is time for another very exciting episode of Red Pill News Live. I want to first thank all of you sincerely for being here with us today on this auspicious occasion. On the day that Eric Swalwell had an FBI search warrant served to him as he was getting off a plane at Los Angeles International Airport, LAX. Got a lot of thoughts about that. They didn't just search his person, they also searched his residence that he shares with his wife and children. Because as you may remember, Eric Swalwell is under federal investigation for sexually assaulting a number of women. But wait, there's more. We also have a whole bunch of information detailing the crimes of James Comey. It's coming directly from the federal government as they make their case in North Carolina. Definitely going to go over that. Got a couple of feel-good stories for you as well. Some election-related information, as you might expect here on Red Pill News. You know, we're going to go ahead and talk about that. And, of course, immigration. We've got a whole segment for you on the dangers of H-1B and what the government and the administration are doing to deal with it. So do me a favor, guys. Sit back, relax, and, of course, grab your popcorn, because we're going to get into it right about now. Oh, my friends, it is such a good day. I love my Schadenfreude with a side of vengeance. That's exactly what I love to see. Oh, man, we have so much to talk about, you guys. Before we get into the very first stories of the day, I need to give a big shout out to our first sponsor today, and I need to let you guys know that I do not want to hand you a problem without handing you a way out of it. I think you know from watching my programs, it's not all doom and gloom. I am going to be honest with you. We're going to talk about everything that's going on in the world, but I always want to give people solutions. Now, you look at what's happening in this country. Politicians, they wrote the law, they staffed the agency, they built this product, but none of that changes unless you learn to watch your money for yourself. And that's what this sponsor is all about. Mark Wilburn teaches you exactly that. I did a great interview with Mark over the weekend, got almost 100,000 views. Thank you very much for checking it out. If you guys haven't seen it, I would highly recommend going and taking a look. We exposed a whole bunch of information related to BlackRock gaining access to your 401k. But Mark teaches you how to watch your money. He is the president of Neos Capital Development Group, and he is putting on a training for this audience completely free. He actually did two of them. One of them was today at 4 p.m., and in the second one, that's going to be Saturday at 11 a.m. In these classes, which are totally free and you can actually interact, I'll be there as well. But in the last one, Mark took 147 trades last year, and he won 78% of the time on these trades. And he also gave the people at the last meeting two names that were free for the people attending, SMR and NNE. Both of those stock picks climbed more than 200% after he called them out. So he is really, really good on the stuff that he recommends. And he is also sending every single person who registers for this class a free copy of his book. So if you guys want to be there, I will be there Saturday at 11 a.m. You can go to the link in the description below. It is redpillticket.com. You can also use that QR code that you see on screen, and you put your name down, register your spot in the class, and then we'll go ahead and get all of our questions answered and get as much information as we possibly can. Once again, the link is in the description, pinned in the comment by Rumble, and I hope to see you guys there. Once again, thank you to Mark Wilburn. And we will see you Saturday, August 22nd at 11 a.m. Just make sure that you register. Okay, now, first of all, you guys, I did want to play a video that really, I thought was just incredible. First of all, if you or somebody that you love has suffered with or been diagnosed with Parkinson's, then you know just how bad it can get. And the treatments that are available for Parkinson's are few and far between. They tend to essentially go the route of medications, or they can be severely invasive, and they're not always successful. But a Parkinson's patient here in the United States just essentially was cured of his tremors thanks to a brand new FDA-approved non-invasive therapy. It is ultrasound. It is a brand new ultrasound treatment. Now, for many years, this man that you see on screen, a 72-year-old Air Force veteran named Bud Lavelle, struggled with severe tremors that basically kept him from being able to do the things that he used to be able to do. And so the doctors at UT Southwestern use this brand new treatment. It's focused ultrasound waves to target precise areas deep within his brain so that they could fix the problem without having to go in and put him under the knife and potentially damage that obviously very critical organ. They don't open his skull. It is a rather quick turnaround from what I understand. And after this follow-up, he completely stopped with the shaking and the tremors. Everything is under control. And so I wanted to play this for you guys because, again, if you or someone that you know has Parkinson's, this may be something that is now available to you, but it is so brand new. I've never heard anybody else talk about it.
What tremor?
So he gets the treatment, and then within minutes, the tremors are 100% gone.
Specifically for Parkinson's disease, this would be our first target in the palatophalmic tract.
Okay, so the other treatment that they would have used that I referred to is called deep brain stimulation. That's the one that requires them to actually cut your skull open. And then I believe that they insert probes deep into your brain, into the areas that they need to stimulate. Because this is non-invasive, it is, you just come in, you get the ultrasounds in your skull, you turn around and you just walk out. Now, many of these people, I would imagine, they're coming in and they're not even able to walk. They're probably taking wheelchairs, or maybe they're using walkers, or maybe they're dependent on other people to help them out. But with this, he goes in, he gets the treatment, he comes right out, and he is completely healed, essentially.
There was...
Look at that. Just a moment ago, he could not keep his hands still. And now he is steady as a rock. This is truly miraculous, you guys. And it happened under President Trump's FDA.
Yeah, I have just tickled pink.
You did great.
Eating was a problem. I wouldn't have been able to keep that cake before.
And now he can eat. He couldn't feed himself before. Yeah, truly astonishing results. So I would be tickled pink if it turns out that somebody in this audience could benefit from a treatment like this. Now, because it's so new, I don't even know that doctors everywhere are aware of it. This may be one of those things that you need to bring to your medical professional. And I know that there is precious little faith in modern medicine amongst our set with very good reason. So anyways, I just wanted to make sure I put that on you guys' radar. All right. Now, also, I had an update for you on baby Gabriel and the situation with his surrogate mother. Apparently, the biological parents of baby Gabriel, they have renamed him Rumi, have sued that young woman for $100,000. Now, what did she do? She let them use her body to grow a baby, and that was a baby that they wanted to murder. Instead of murdering that baby, she went to Texas and had it and got the life-saving treatment. And now those parents will have a beautiful child that is theirs to raise for the rest of its life. So this, of course, is a case that a lot of people have been paying attention to because McKenna West risked everything to protect this child that was inside of her. And the California couple, Nasheen Gilkar and Omar Ahmed, invoked this abortion clause in their surrogacy contract because they didn't want to have a baby that had any defects. So they did gain temporary physical custody while the baby is undergoing this necessary medical treatment. But now they've turned around and filed this countersuit alleging her of breaching the agreement because they didn't kill the baby. So the lawsuit has been obtained by TMZ, and Gilkar and Ahmed claim that West violated their contract. They had paid her $60,000. They included that provision, allowing them to demand abortion if fetal issues arose. And by refusing their order to abort and instead traveling to Texas so she could be recognized as the birth mother under state law, they are now seeking $100,000 in damages plus unspecified sums for what they call malicious, outrageous conduct. The only people that I see engaging in malicious and outrageous conduct are the natural parents of this child who demanded that the surrogate mother kill it before it could be born because it was going to have something small wrong with it. Now, Miss West, in speaking to the New York Post, gave her rationale for why she had decided to have this child. She said, every life matters, and no woman should be forced to end the life of the baby she is carrying, including me. Baby Gabriel should receive a chance at life. And she is actually continuing to fight in the state of Texas for her own parental rights because it appears that the birth parents don't really want to raise this baby. Now, her attorney has emphasized that the biological parents have stopped all payments after she declined the abortion and that West is prepared for a full legal battle, and that would include going all the way to the Supreme Court. Reproductive law experts note that Miss West faces an uphill climb under standard surrogacy frameworks, but because the case has already kind of sparked a lot of international debate and questions about the ethics of forcing someone to abort a baby, this actually may go in a very different direction. Now, baby Gabriel is still not out of the woods. The heart defect that he suffers from does require multiple surgeries, but there is a strong chance at him surviving and having a totally normal life. Miss West has offered to assume full responsibility of the baby while releasing the parents from all obligations. She doesn't even want any money or anything. She just wants the right to raise the child that she carried for 9 months. But the parents have refused. They appear to want to opt for palliative care that would allow the newborn to die. Do you understand that? They went through this whole thing because the surrogate mother refused to kill the baby in utero. They simply want to hand the baby over to doctors, which will preside over its ultimate death, allowing it to die outside the womb instead because they couldn't kill it before it was born. So after Miss West had delivered baby Gabriel in Texas and Ken Paxton secured these protections, preventing the infant's removal from the state without medical necessity, the biological parents then obtained temporary custody. That was, however, through California, and this entire opera is playing out in Texas. And so even as the child that they once sought to bring to this earth and then abort fights for his life and specialized care, they are demanding that the woman who brought their child to this earth pay them money because they were inconvenienced. So it is a pretty crazy story, and I wish Miss West the best. And obviously, we will continue to cover this as new information is made known. All right. Now, This is probably going to bring some people to tears. Tulsi Gabbard and her husband have posted an update about his extremely rare bone cancer and the challenges that they have had to deal with for the last several months. Wanted to let America know how he was doing and where his progression has gone to. And so we're going to watch this in its entirety.
Earlier this year, my husband Abraham was diagnosed with cancer. I picked up the phone and Abraham's voice was different. He said that he got a call from his doctor, and the doctor told him that he has sacral chordoma, very, very rare, 1 in a million type of cancer. We talked with our doctors and said, okay, what are our options? One is a very invasive surgery to remove the bottom part of Abraham's sacrum and his tailbone. And the other option was radiation. So we scheduled the surgery as quickly as we could. Got your space boots on?
Yep.
Sure. Your bouffant?
My what?
Bouffant. They started preparing him for this surgery. I was so happy to see him when they wheeled him back into that recovery room, but it was also really scary, which I didn't expect. He'd been under heavy anesthesia for almost 8 hours. His body, as he started to come out, started reacting to the drugs that were in his body. It was tough.
We're hurting right here.
So that night, more than a few times, Abraham said, I want to get up. He had some help from some great nurses to just start very, very slowly walking around. He would take a few steps. He would throw up as he was trying to walk around, but he kept going. He refused to take any narcotic pain medication, and so he really had to push through the post-operative pain. A few weeks after the surgery was done,
that's I got a lot of respect for that. That's a huge burden to go through surgery that invasive and not take any type of opiate medication to stave off that pain. That's a big deal.
Pathologists and the doctors said that they are confident that they were able to cut out all of the cancerous bone and tissue. So here we are now, almost 3 months after he started a very rigorous physical therapy program. He gets frustrated a lot because he wants to be able to make progress faster, and sometimes he's pushed a little bit too far, but overall Abraham is progressing very well. The reality is that the battle isn't over yet. He'll have to continue to get frequent MRIs to keep an eye on whether or not this cancer is coming back either in the same place or in other parts of his body. We are so grateful to God for his unconditional love, for being our shelter, for being our peace and our strength. We want to say thank you to the doctors, the surgeon, the pathologist, the anesthesiologist. We want to say thank you to all of you sharing the most beautiful prayers and well wishes with us. Mahalo nui loa to you all.
Oh, God.
Love you, darling.
Love you.
It just tears me up. So it's at least good to know that he is clearly progressing. The surgery theoretically got the cancer, but we have to be honest here. Bone cancer is extremely, extremely aggressive. His particular form of bone cancer is no walk in the park. God bless both of them. Please keep them safe. Keep everybody in your prayers, and I hope that he is able to make it through this. All right, now I haven't spoken about this yet, not since the arrest happened, but there is currently a trial ongoing for the murder of Tupac Shakur. Now, you may not be a fan of hip-hop music. I'm certainly not, but I'm a kid of the 90s, and so the murders of Tupac and Biggie writ large in the background of my life and in the lives of so many kids of that era. And it would appear that Sean P. Diddy Combs, the man who is currently in prison for his sex trafficking crimes, is likely to be charged in the murder of Tupac Shakur. And that's because Dwayne Davis, the man who actually pulled the trigger, reportedly told police that Diddy had offered him $1 million to kill Tupac. Now, it's been 30 years. I can't believe it. 30 years since Tupac was killed in a drive-by shooting at the absolute height of his fame. And Dwayne Keefe D. Davis is the guy who's on trial for masterminding that murder. And according to prosecutors, Tupac's shooting was part of an LA gang war. Legal sources are suggesting to The Telegraph that Sean Combs is likely to also face charges for this murder. Now, if you've followed this case for any length of time, it's probably not surprising to you that Sean Combs is finally being charged in some respect with having something to do with the murder of Tupac. This has been a pervasive rumor, and there are many people out there who believe that Sean Combs not only had Tupac killed, but also had Biggie Smalls killed. The prosecution's case hinges on the fact that Mr. Davis's own claims to the police in documentary interviews as well, and in a memoir, that he sought out Shakur after his nephew was targeted as part of a rival gang feud. Keefe D was a moron about this. This guy must have thought that there was some kind of statute of limitation on murders. I was shocked to see that he had talked about it so openly. But he also alleges that he was in the white Cadillac where the fatal bullet was fired from, and that he was the one who tossed the gun to the rapper's killer. So he was directly involved. Maybe he's just too stupid to know that if you orchestrate a murder, hand the actual trigger man the weapon and say, shoot that guy, you're also guilty of murder. Now, there are secret police recordings from 2008, and this is where Davis told the police that he and other gang members from the Southside Compton Crips were the ones who shot Tupac back in 1996. That's the year that I graduated high school, 30 years ago. Holy shit. Wow, I'm feeling old. In that secret recording, which is now entered into evidence in the trial, Mr. Davis also apparently alleges that Sean Combs, who is currently serving that 50-month jail sentence on federal prostitution charges, is the one who offered him the $1 million bounty to kill Tupac. Now, if prosecutors manage to convict Davis, it's going to give them a green light to go ahead and file charges against Diddy. This is coming from a source who is within the district attorney's office. Mr. Davis is also insisting that the claims he made were not true. They were actually just to gain fame and notoriety. Well, I guess hindsight's 20/20, Keefe D. The prosecution is saying that Tupac was killed as payback for the rapper and his bodyguards beating up Keefe D's nephew, a man by the name of Orlando Anderson. That happened earlier on the night of the murder. And prosecutors also allege Davis's allegations about his involvement in the killings of the rapper Tupac is definitely true. That's why they're bringing the charges and why he's on trial. Now, this long-running feud that was happening between Combs and Shakur in the 90s largely stems from an armed robbery where Tupac had been shot. He believed he was set up by Sean Combs and his associates, with the situation only further escalating by the release of a single by Notorious B.I.G. called Who Shot Ya? Now, if the jury convicts Davis, it's going to add credence to his claims about Combs' involvement in the apparent offer. Likely, it is going to result in Sean Combs also being charged in this murder, and this would be the result that people were hoping for when he ended up getting convicted and sent to prison previously. This is the case that could put him in prison for the rest of his life. All right. Now, also, we've learned that the DEA has joined the investigation into the apparent death of Hayden Panettiere, and that's because it is likely to be a result of a drug overdose. Now, toxicology results are still pending, but certainly interesting that the Drug Enforcement Agency has now gotten into this widening investigation into her sudden and unexpected death. Now, if you didn't know who Hayden Panettiere was, you may remember her from decades ago. She was in a show called Heroes. She was in another show called Nashville. She was in another show called Remember the Titans. She was also an actress in the Scream franchise, and she died at a private residence in Greenville, South Carolina this past Sunday. She was only 36 years old. Now, the DEA agents are assisting with parallel investigations. These are being conducted by the Greenville City Police Department, as well as the Greenville County Coroner's Office. And it's being reported that Greenville police are going to remain the lead investigative agency, with the DEA providing assistance and any sort of help that they can. But the precise reason for the federal agency's involvement has not yet been disclosed. When contacted by TMZ, a spokesperson for the DEA only said the DEA does not confirm or comment on active investigations. So that right there is the clue that, yes, in fact, they are involved in the investigation of her death. Now, this major development comes after emergency dispatch audio, which referenced a possible overdose while paramedics were desperately attempting to revive her, was revealed. And of course, as I reported previously, Narcan was on scene. That's an emergency medication that is used to reverse opioid overdoses, and that was on scene. Authorities have not yet established that narcotics caused or contributed to Panettiere's death. The only thing that they have said for certain was that she did have a heart attack. From what I understand, she was a cocaine user. However, when you're using hard drugs, it's not a big switch to go from an upper to a downer. Once these toxicology reports are released, we should be able to get a clearer image of what exactly happened to her. According to the Greenville police, Panettiere, at the time of her death, was with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, a man by the name of Brian Hickerson, and his brother, Zak Hickerson, when she died. There are a number of reports out there that say that Brian Hickerson was not only an unrepentant drug addict, but that he was also abusive, physically abusive to Hayden Panettiere. He specifically fueled her drug addiction, making it worse and essentially making it impossible for her to regain custody of her child that she had with the brother of the mayor of Kiev. There is also, of course, stories of Brian and Zak Hickerson both having a sexual relationship with Hayden Panettiere. Now, the report states that it's unknown whether or not she had consumed drugs or alcohol. We're only going to find that out once we get the toxicology results back. Hickerson showed responding officers a bag containing medication that Panettiere had been taking. We also don't know what was in that bag yet. And when they found her, she was dead already. She was in cardiac arrest. They attempted life support measures to try to bring her back. They were unable to revive her, and she was pronounced dead shortly after 2:30 p.m. Now, the preliminary autopsy found no sign of trauma, so no indication that she had been murdered. But we all know that there are ways to kill somebody and make it look like natural causes or a death or an overdose. And I go back, the only reason I say that is because I go back to the fact that she recently wrote this memoir where she had exposed some very rich and powerful people for essentially pimping her out when she was underage. So the cause and manner of death remain pending this further investigation, and officials have said that the preliminary investigation showed no signs of foul play or suspicious circumstances. We'll go ahead and wait for everything to come out. But the fact that the DEA is involved, I think that gives us a clue that there is something much larger going on here. All right, now I have some good news about the religion of peace. The FBI has thwarted yet another would-be terrorist here in the United States, this time in New York State. Islam right now is on the march and spreading fast around the United States. You might be waking up to the calls to prayer early in the morning and then 5 more times throughout the day. But a woman who converted to Islam 5 years ago was just arrested because she was about to undertake an ISIS-inspired plot to bomb the New York State Capitol in Albany. Her name is Jessica Bowie. She is a 35-year-old woman, and speaking to a confidential informant on July 17th to August 17th, interesting timing there, she wanted to do something that would harm the enemies of God. She said not only did she want to kill the New York State senators who would be convening in a meeting there in the Capitol building in Albany, but she also wanted to kill President Trump. And she said that's an even harder job than killing the New York State legislators. Now, according to the complaint, Bowie had created a number of social media accounts where she would express her support for Islamic terrorism, and the social media accounts would frequently be suspended by providers for violating the terms of use. She lived very close to the Albany State Capitol building, just about 2 miles from that building. Now, the woman has been charged with providing support to a terror group after this plot to create an ISIS-inspired attack on the state Capitol building. She told this confidential source that she supported ISIS. She asked them to help her learn how to make explosives. And according to the criminal complaint that was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of New York, we expected to see Bowie in court today, Thursday afternoon, in conjunction with this single charge of attempting to provide material support to a designated foreign terror organization. It is likely that she may be hit with superseding indictments as more information becomes known, and of course, as federal officials gain access to her online accounts, her electronic devices, and they start going through the network that she was connected to. So she also was spoken about by the FBI and I believe some officials from New York in these two clips that we're going to watch. She had screamed, allegedly, "Praise Allah for September 11th, and I will poison these infidels." I'm pretty sure she's a white woman, and she had planned to place these bombs outside of Gracie Mansion as an attack on Christian activists about some months ago. So let's go ahead and take a listen as they detail her arrest. No, I believe it's a she, because every source that I've seen, it says that she's a C, Jessica Bowman.
Wanted to announce the arrest of Jessica Bowie, age 35, of Albany, New York. She's charged with one count of 18 U.S.C. 2339B, attempting to provide material support or resources to a designated foreign terrorist organization, namely the Islamic Republic of Iraq, commonly known as ISIS. On Wednesday, August 19, 2026, Bowie was apprehended by law enforcement for her actions attempting to provide material support to designated foreign terrorist organizations. Bowie had plotted to use an explosive device to attack the New York State Capitol and the New York State Senators. The American people embody an enduring spirit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, values fundamentally opposed by foreign terrorists. Organizations such as this one and this defendant is accused of supporting.
Man, it just makes me wonder if we're ever really going to do anything about these people. Because it just seems to be a repeating pattern. This is like, typical pattern recognition. We can see this coming a mile away every single time. Now, here is a little bit more information about her plot. This is Craig Tremoroli. He's the special agent in charge of the Albany field office for the FBI, and he details the plot where she discussed exactly what she wanted to do.
We're just weeks away from commemorating the 25th anniversary of the attacks on 9/11. This investigation highlights the harsh reality that there are still adversaries intent on conducting terrorist attacks on American soil. As alleged in this complaint, Ms. Bowie is one of them. You'll see in the court documents that she once wrote, quote, "Praise be Allah for September 11th. Also in the court documents, she told the source that she went from a little girl waving an American flag after 9/11 to now having stickers of the fallen towers. Folks, let that sink in.
You got to wonder, where and when was she radicalized? At 5 years ago, she converted to Islam, but her journey to become an Islamist terrorist didn't begin exactly at that moment. Someone likely groomed her prior to that. Or maybe she was just exposed to this insanity through the mainstream media. Maybe a mosque was put up in her town. Who knows? I do have one clue about a possible source of radicalization. We'll take a look at that in just a moment.
Again, Miss Bowie didn't just want to kill lawmakers. She wanted a complete disruption of our government. And after that, she planned to flee the country and one day come back to, quote, do more, such as New Year's Eve in Times Square, even stating she would come back to attack the White House and the president, but only after she bombed the state capitol. I'm here with our partners to say, not on our watch.
Yep, not going to let that one happen. I'm glad they're actually doing something about this stuff. Well, would you look at this? Jessica Bowie, also now known as Aisha Saif, apparently picked up an anarchist literature booklet at the Social Justice Center. Apparently, this is what gave her tips for planning her attack. They actually say this in the indictment. On July 22nd, Bowie told Confidential Human Source 1 on Platform 2, which is a social media platform, that she had picked up some anarchist literature at the Social Justice Center the day before, which in her view could have some good tips in Sha Allah Ta'ala. Based on my training and experience, I know that Inshallah Ta'ala is if Allah the Most High wills it, and I believe Bowie's reference to good tips was a reference to her planned attack. I'll be very interested to know if they do any more sleuthing on this particular social justice center where she picked up these apparent tips on how to plan a terrorist attack. They really ought to. Hopefully there's going to be some co-conspirators that get indicted in the near future. All right. Now, I have briefly spoken about the now deceased and fired and disgraced former Cambridge professor Jason Arday. Last week, his story blew up because he had been accused of plagiarism. He did commit plagiarism. He was also a narcissist and just like a perennial liar. He couldn't stop lying about himself and his deeds and his accomplishments. But the man who originally called him out, his name is Nathan Kofnas. He is also a professor and an academic, and he was a professor at Ghent University. Well, because he called him out and Jason got fired by Cambridge, or Jason left Cambridge under suspicion, I should say, and then took the coward's way out and killed himself, they have actually suspended the young man who called him out in the first place. So Professor Nathan Kofnas is now no longer a professor at Ghent University. They have let him go for apparent discrimination and racism. So I will tell you just how bad the story of Jason Arday is. But the fact that he's dead is obviously a tragedy. I, however, do not see any reason that we should be mourning him. The man committed suicide because he did not like having all of his lies exposed. His death, a suicide, is because of events that he himself set in motion. It has nothing to do with either this other professor that called him out or the many media outlets that were forced to report on the numerous and unending series of lies that Jason Arday had told throughout his time in the spotlight. He had completely and utterly fabricated every aspect of his life, of his professional experience, of everything that you could imagine. This dude lied about. He basically made a deal with the devil in order to get famous. And once he achieved his academic stardom, it became impossible to cover all of that stuff up. In the age of the internet, if you lie about who you are and you lie about your identity and you lie about the things that you've done and you plagiarize other people's work when you are publishing your work, people are going to fact check it, people are going to take note, and people are going to call it out. So now you've got this this conversation going on in the UK. Again, the people who called him out did nothing wrong. He deserved to get called out. It's a shame that he's dead. But now there are groups in the UK that are calling for something that they hope to name Arday's Law, which would essentially limit the amount of coverage that media could devote to a person over a short period of time in the UK. It's absolutely stunning level of stupidity. It has only gained 4,300 verified signatures, but many of the people in the United Kingdom who are in leadership and government, let's just be honest, they're total pussies. And I could see them essentially falling prey to something like this because maybe they feel bad about what happened to Jason Arde. Now, there was also another petition from a place called the Good Law Project, which calls for an inquiry into the death of Arde. No need for that. The man committed suicide. I think that we can go ahead and save y'all a couple of £100,000. But they do not propose any concrete limits on free speech. There's already quite a few limits on free speech in the UK. Bless the people of England. Now, they do call his death the direct, foreseeable, and foreseen result of press harassment. He was not harassed by the press. Very, very, very clearly, the press reported on the lies that he told, but they were very, very kind to him because they, of course, have got to play into the whole DEI rhetoric as well. So let me tell you a little bit about Jason's history. He was hired in 2023 at the age of 37, which made him the youngest black professor, I believe the youngest professor in the history of the University of Cambridge. That is a very, very prestigious university in the United Kingdom. And of course, they typically will only hire the best of the best. Now, they hired him despite the fact that he had already been called out and had his work questioned in the past. There were obvious signs of plagiarism in much of his work. His backstory was so strange. He claimed that he had been nonverbal until the age of 11. He said that he couldn't read until he was 18. He also shockingly claimed to have been an elite ultra marathon runner. He said that he once ran 600 miles in 6 days for charity, and that in doing so, he raised almost £5.5 million for charity. None of those things happened. Jason then became an academic superstar because he was young, he was black, he had this tragic backstory, and he would frequently appear on television in both the U.S. and the UK and other places around the world. He even had a memoir that he was preparing to publish. It was called Great and Unfortunate Things. But then people realized that what they had suspected about him was far more insidious than what they had been allowed to talk about, because it turns out that this had been noticed privately years before, but it had been kept private by the legal team that represented Arde. And even after there was virtually unassailable evidence that had come out to show that he was a plagiarist and that most of the things that he said were false, Cambridge continued to stand by him because, of course, they hired him as the poster child of DEI in the UK. They called the claims a vile smear campaign to undermine his credibility. Now, it quieted people down to some degree, but it didn't really do the job. And that's because the body of his academic writings and his work were fully and freely available online. And now with the advent of artificial intelligence, people began to take those papers and those chapters that he had written, and they ran them through AI checkers. Now, those are not perfect, but you can get a pretty good idea. And especially with the versions that they have now, they can actually link the plagiarized text with the original text, and then you can compare it side by side. And it was obvious. So it got to the point where Jason had to relinquish his position at Cambridge because Cambridge finally said that they were going to investigate. And then within a couple of days over the weekend, he took his own life in his London apartment. And so that's it. That's where we're at. But let me actually show you just how much of a liar this guy is. Okay, this is called green text. If you guys never been on 4chan, you won't know what that is. But this is a tip. This is a trope that's used on 4chan. So, be me, Jason Arde. Claim diagnosed autistic at age 3. Claim nonverbal until 11. Claim partial deafness in one ear and being taught to sign by yourself. Claim you couldn't read until age 18. Still leave school with 2 GCSEs. Those are 2 undergraduate degrees. Claim you joined the Pro Snooker Tour at age 10, a year before you could speak. Claim you won so much at snooker, your mom thought you were dealing drugs. Have the sports database show just one amateur event many years later with having won 0 prize money. Claim football academy and a pro career. That would be soccer for the Americans in the audience. Have Crystal Palace say there's no record. Have the real record show you played at Tier 8. Claim to have been on 7 Up, a series that first tracked 7-year-olds as they grew up. The only problem is it first aired 28 years before you were actually 7 years old. Have the BBC say you weren't in on it since you're not a time traveler. Claim youths at a bus stop beat you into a weeks-long coma. Claim you heard medics tell your parents to switch off the life support. Claim you begged the judge to spare them. Claim they turned up years later as your students, the kids who allegedly beat you up and put you into a coma. You hug them, become godfather to one of their children. Claim 30 marathons in 35 days in 2010, the last 9 on a broken leg, swollen to twice its size. Add an epileptic fit in later when you're telling the story because the lies changed over the years. Tell your local paper you raised more than $100,000 since you were 17. Claim running 600 miles in 6 days as your final challenge when the men's record is 650. Claim it came as the same time as you had a stroke. Have no race time on record anywhere because why bother? Have nobody in the ultra marathon world ever hear of you. Hand in a PhD on reflective practice with 100 plus passages matching another student's 2009 thesis. Have 188 sentences come back identical or near identical, including her copy editing errors. Match a second PhD and 2 published papers on top of that. Claim you did it all in 2.5 years, working full-time with a brain tumor. Claim the tumor was cut out 2 weeks before the Viva. Claim you had a stroke after surgery. Claim you turned up and remembered nothing at all. Claim 1 supervision meeting in your whole doctorate. Get the PhD anyway. Publish a paper claiming focus groups with 32 Black and minority students. Have the quotes match an epidemiologist's quotes. Have the structures follow his too. Lift quotes into other papers and pass them off as interviews you conducted. Get a correction, not a retraction, because, well, of course, he was DEI. Delete 18 of the 31 quotes. Get a full chair at Glasgow. Tell the TEDx crowd you raised over $5 million by the age of 36. Claim you were once watched a teacher tell a boy who wanted to be a concert pianist to aim lower. Retell sort of the same story in 2021 with the boy now as a would-be astrophysicist. Retell it again in 2023 as your own experience and open a 4chan film with it. Be the youngest Black professor in 900 years and at Cambridge. Get the BBC radio series on loneliness. Claim 70% of Brits live below the breadline. Be voted #1 in the Disability Power 100. Collect honorary degrees from Solent, Anglia Ruskin, St. Mary's, Westminster, and London South Bank. Say you raised millions for 70-plus charities. Claim a Palgrave book called Being Young, Black, and Male. Have Palgrave say they never published that book. Claim water points built for water aid across South America and Africa. Have water aid webpage titled Why We Don't Send Volunteers Abroad. List yourself as a visiting professor at Glasgow. Have Glasgow say, you're not a visiting professor. List yourself as a visiting professor at Ohio State's Office of DEI. Have no record and have that office turn out to have actually shut down in 2025. Have Birkbeck say they have no record of your master's degree. Have Nelson Mandela University say the adjunct post had ended. Get a second paper corrected in 2024. Tell a funeral directors convention in New Orleans the Ultras raised $5 million alone, but there's no record once again. Be named on more than $10 million in UKRI and NIHR grants. Write to a minister claiming knife threats, assault, spitting, rape, death threats, plus bananas, bullets, corrosive substances, and mutilated animals, photograph none of these attacks for some odd reason, claim a masked man with a knife cornered you in the faculty lounge twice, show up on no CCTV either time, everything is recorded in the UK, and then you tell nobody about the attack that allegedly just happened to you. This is probably not even an expansive list of all of the lies and the times that Jason Arde had been caught completely fabricating every aspect of his life. But it goes to show you the insidious power of DEI, that even in the face of all of these obvious instances of this man having constructed his life out of whole cloth and just giving it to people with a sense of authority and people buying it because he is young and black and a professor, it goes to show you what people can get away with and why it's so important that people gain positions, get hired, enter university based upon aptitude, not based upon some immutable characteristic that has nothing to do with their ability to learn or to teach or to even integrate into society. This man was a pathological liar, and his suicide is just the latest aspect of his efforts to try to gain as much sympathy as possible. Because now Jason Arde died without having a full investigation into all of these things. This is merely just being put together after the fact. Anyways, that's probably the last thing I'll say about Jason Arde, unless I celebrate the people who have been fired for exposing him getting their jobs back. Oh, speaking of getting fired, I saw this spicy tweet last night from Dan Scavino. He said, when you get fired for doing a spectacularly shitty job at an agency, with your badge deactivated, building access revoked, and the full "you're dead to us" package, or when you get passed over for ambassadorships, boards, or commissions because there are candidates who are actually far more qualified than you, please resist the urge to sprint to every media outlet that will platform your lying bullshit and then falsely attack the people in the presidential personnel office who are out here serving President Trump, the administration, and the American people each and every day. Just take the L and move on, loser. Well, I wasn't going to let this one just slip past without figuring out exactly who Dan Scavino was talking about. And I think that we can firmly say that it's this guy right here. So this is a Jason Ulliott. Jason Ulliott was featured in this New York Times article. I believe that he was anonymous. And this guy that wrote the article also had worked with the other people that were in the administration who came forward as anonymous people like Miles Taylor. So apparently he was saying a lot of shit about Pete Hegseth and the sort of, I guess, out of control nature of the Department of War right now. And Trip Gabriel, the guy who wrote this article, he says, after an 18-year career at Fox News, Jennifer Hegseth is now her husband's most influential advisor and de facto producer, shaping the job like no Pentagon spouse has ever before. It's bonkers, says an ex-Pentagon spokes under Hegseth. That would be Jason Ulliott. Now, I personally have no problem with a man's wife having a strong guiding hand in the background because obviously they love each other. They've been together for many years. And clearly, Pete Hegseth, I think, is doing a great job at the Department of War. So now Alex Burns retweets that article. Well, he responds to Politico. And I think that Alex Burns works at Politico. We have published a piece from John Ulliott, who just resigned as top Pentagon spokesperson, warning the department is in chaos and predicting it will cost Pete Hegseth his job. So Ulliott went to New York Times. He went to Politico, probably went to a number of other places. But Don Jr. retweets Alex Burns and says, this guy, John Ulliott, is not America first. I've been hearing for years that he works his ass off to subvert my father's agenda. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on. Okay, can you hear me on Rumble? That was very strange. They pulled me out. Hold on, I'm going to wait until we're back on Rumble. Okay. Yeah. Can you guys see me on Rumble? Oh, my God. Am I back? Oh, my God. You still can't see me on Rumble? Oh, my God. YouTube is working, but Rumble is not working. God damn it. Hold on. Everybody stay still. I can't believe this. Cannot believe it. Okay, we're going to try to go in through a different browser. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so it's like it pulled me out, and then I went back in, and it's not fucking working. Sorry, guys. Everybody else can hear me. Hold on. We're going to try to go in through Chrome. I'm going to be so pissed if... No, that's the wrong one. Hold on. Let me... Can you guys see me on Rumble? Can you guys see me on Rumble now? You didn't do it. Nobody did it. Okay, testing on Rumble. Testing. Yeah, I get it. Black screen, no sound. Still no video or sound. I can't believe this. No. Okay. So, what? I can't believe they just did this. I cannot believe they did this. Okay, I'm going to try something else. We're going to shut down my browser. Okay, if everybody over on the other platforms, YouTube, etc., can confirm that you can see me again. Rumble, tell me if you can see me again, because otherwise I'm going to have to cancel. I'm going to have to end this stream and make another one if it doesn't work on Rumble. Am I back on Rumble? I know everything except Rumble should be working. Still 0 by 0 on Rumble. Okay. So nothing. And we're back on YouTube, we're back on Getter, we're back on X. Okay. So everything came back except for Rumble. I have to end the Rumble stream and make a part 2. I will pin it to the channel and share on X. So Ending now for Rumble and starting again. Okay, Rumble, we're going to go ahead and end. No. We're going to go ahead and end the Rumble stream, and then I will create a new one. Okay, so let's go ahead and title it Part 2. Save changes. Start stream. Okay, and then let me go to my channel. My content. There is Part 2. Make sure that I add the thumbnail back in. We didn't even get to the Swalwell stuff, and they're already trying to shut me down. Okay. All right. And let me refresh. Let me go back in here. And it looks like Rumble is working again. Yes. Something is happening with Rumble Studio. Yesterday, it didn't work at all. And this is now the second time that it's kicked me out and forced me to do what we just did. So I love you, darling. Thank you. Let me go ahead and repost this. Rumble Studio failed. Had to make a new stream. Please come to this link. Copy, repost, and let me go in here and pin this to the top of the page. Feature, pin, save. Okay. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I need to get the correct chat up on the screen for everybody. Let me share this on X. Studio failed. Please come to this link. Okay, there we go. Post. And might as well pin that to my profile. There we go. And share it on Truth as well. Yeah, Amber, you're telling me. I'm tired, boss. I'm tired, boss. Oh, man. Oh, thank you for that, Helio. Appreciate you, buddy. Okay, so let me close down the socials. If you guys wouldn't mind helping me out on Rumble, sharing this out, because obviously not everybody is going to get here. Let me share this also. I'll put this out on my Telegram too. All right. Cancel and bring this up. Okay. Now, the fun part's going to be editing these two halves together and getting rid of all this dead air. Okay. All right. So let's jump back into where we were. I'm going to have to fix the stuff on screen. So let me do that. Let's get our window back up here. Yes, hopefully you guys are filtering your way back in. And if you're just getting here, do me a favor, hit the like button and help us out by sharing the show so people will know where we are. Pop out the chat, copy. Oh, Boom Diggity, thank you so much for the $100 rant. She says, thanks for all you do, Zach. And then also, before I got a chance to say this on the last stream, Principled Enigma, he says, every day the Lord gives us another chance to get it right, and just gave me 2 chances today. Stay faithful, everyone. Thank you for that. And then Mike Stag 66 says to help pay the internet bill. Thank you for that, Mike. I appreciate you, buddy. Appreciate you both. And thank you so much, Boom Diggity. That is so generous of you, my friend. Okay, and then let me pop out the rants so that I can reference those later in the show. Okay. All right. And, I just realized that Pilled was not filtering the gold pills for me. Let me say thanks to Sean Joe for 2 cookies, Ginger for a cookie, Sean Joe for a cookie. Filter Dog says, North Carolina's governor just told every resident to observe Ramadan. Governor Josh Stein issued an official state proclamation recognizing Ramadan. That is insane. Judy the Lady Pug, thank you for the cookie. No thanks, Joe, says good Thursday to you, Zach and Lisa. Thanks for all your hard work. God bless and be safe. Sean Joe, thank you for another cookie. Darla, thanks for a can. Much love, Zach and Lisa. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but you always somehow make it through. We appreciate you guys. I appreciate you as well, Darla. And Sean Joe, thank you for another cookie. Okay. Drock, I didn't do anything. It was some type of issue on the back end with Rumble Studio. So I had to cancel or end the Rumble stream and then begin again, essentially. All right. So let me say thank you also to Snowcat Operator for gifting a subscription to McGriff. I appreciate you. All right. So as I was saying before we were so rudely interrupted, Don Jr. exposed Mr. Ulyat for not being America First. He said, I've been hearing for years that this guy works his ass off to subvert my dad's agenda. That ends today. He's officially exiled from our movement. And acting press secretary Joel Valdez from the Department of War commented as well. He says the ex-Pentagon spokes in question is, in fact, John Ulyat. John, who was exiled from the MAGA movement by Donald Trump Jr., is acting like a crazy ex, and quite frankly, it's embarrassing. He was terrible at his job, and now he lashes out at the secretary any chance that he gets. He should accept this administration wasn't that into him and move on with his sad life. Love to see it. All right. Now, actually, before we continue, I have to mention another sponsor, and so I want to get this out of the way before I find out that something else terrible had happened. Thank you again. Please hit that like button, you guys. Do appreciate it. All right. Now, let me get this pulled up. If I can just have a few moments of your time, if you guys have been dealing with bloating after meals, energy that crashes by 2 o'clock, or maybe skin that just won't clear up no matter how hard you try, give me that 60 seconds to try to share something with you. I'm sure by now you've heard about gut health. We've talked about it here on the show plenty of times. Most people don't pay much attention to it. They don't even look into it. But for those who have, let me ask you something. Have you ever found anything that truly worked, like really worked in terms of you getting rid of stomach issues, constant bloating in your gut? I've tried a number of things in the past, and oftentimes they seem to be temporary fixes that don't actually address the problem. So they sent me a bottle of Holiar's Wormwood Complex. It's got 18 natural ingredients, including wormwood, black walnut, clove, and pumpkin seed extract. All of these things are made to support your body's natural cleansing process and then help to restore that internal balance. All you do is take 3 soft gels once a day before breakfast. That's the whole routine. It couldn't be any simpler. It's third-party tested. There's no artificial fillers. And every order they send you comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And for a limited time, because of them sponsoring the program, you can get up to 60% off through the link that will be pinned below. Also is visible on screen with the QR code, but it is holior.com/s/redpill. That is holior.com/s/redpill. So check out holior.com/s/redpill in the link below and the description. Thank you very much to them for supporting the program. Appreciate you. Okay. Now, we have some new information about Carmelo Anthony. There was a lot of people after the conviction of Carmelo Anthony who attempted to say that he had somehow been railroaded, that it was an unfair trial, that the jury was racist, that the prosecution was biased from the very beginning, that Austin Metcalf deserved to get stabbed in the chest for asking Carmelo Anthony to go sit under his own school's tent. Of course, none of those are true, but Carmelo Anthony has now requested a new trial, and the judge from his first trial has just been recused because he made statements about Carmelo Anthony's guilt after he had been found guilty by the jury. But in this new trial that is just now starting, we are getting a clearer view of the evidence that the prosecution had in the first case and decided it wasn't necessary to mention it. So Collin County prosecutor Bill Werske, who is going to be taking the reins on this second trial, detailed how now convicted murderer Carmelo Anthony reportedly had been stalking his ex-girlfriend just before the fatal stabbing of Austin Metcalf at that Frisco track meet. And it's not just your average, everyday garden variety stalking. Carmelo Anthony, in his own words, appeared to be very disturbed as an individual. Werske shared some of the text messages that they have in their possession where Carmelo expressed on the day of the stabbing to being, quote, on the verge. And in a text where he was threatening his ex-girlfriend that he was stalking, he fantasized about stabbing someone and licking the blood from the blade. Now, the prosecution told the court that Anthony's former girlfriend, Valeria Perez, went to school officials that very morning and reportedly told them that she had broken up with him and that he was stalking her. And then it was just 1 hour later that young Austin Metcalf was stabbed to death under the Memorial High School tent at David Kuykendall Stadium. And of course, he died in the arms of his twin brother. Now, these text messages were recovered from the very morning that Carmelo Anthony committed that brutal and unrepentant murder. He wrote, "I'm low-key on the verge." The prosecutor also revealed that Anthony had a history of violence, which, of course, makes a lot of sense when you realize that he stabbed a young boy in the heart for doing nothing at all. But he had previously been taken by his parents to a special program at LSU. This program was for children who could not keep their hands to themselves because he was apparently obsessed with starting fights. Chillingly, Werske also shared that text where Anthony fantasized about stabbing someone and then licking the blood from the blade, adding that Carmelo Anthony, quote, wanted to stab someone. So this is about as specific as you can get when looking at the evidence against Carmelo. And I don't know how these people are going to be able to write this stuff off. Let's be honest. They essentially gave him a pass for the murder the first time. I don't think that they're going to have any problem with him talking about stabbing people, wanting to lick the blood off the blade. This is highly disturbing. This is obviously not the type of person that you want walking around in civilized society. This is why prisons exist. I don't care how young this boy was. I don't care, whatever he accomplished in his life. He essentially accomplished nothing. But the fact that she told the school that she believed she was in danger and that Carmelo had made these disturbing statements and the school did nothing, I think that lays even more blame at the feet of the school administrators. But likely, in the same way that Jason Arde was allowed to maintain his position at Cambridge, Carmelo Anthony was allowed to continue walking around that school with that knife in his bag, looking for the next white boy to put his hands on him so that he could kill him and then lick that blood off the blade. There is blood clearly on the hands of those administrators, in my opinion. Werske said there is a text message where he fantasizes about stabbing someone and licking blood off the blade. Now, all of these details were part of a 404 motion that the state had prepared regarding Carmelo's character and prior acts, which, of course, the defense had sought to keep out of the original trial. Now, Perez, oddly enough, had publicly launched an official Carmelo Anthony fan page on Instagram where she supported her boyfriend and called him her sweet boy. This was after the verdict was announced. Now, she clearly could be doing that because she's young and she's misguided. Maybe she knows that she could get herself some internet clout because there's a lot of retards out there who believe Carmelo Anthony was improperly convicted. But I wanted to show you this tweet from Sarah Fields because she, in my opinion, did the best coverage on the scene for this trial as it was happening. And she was the first place that I actually read this. Now, she says that these statements by Carmelo, it's not just that he told the ex-girlfriend that, you know, he was planning on stabbing somebody, or he was on the verge of stabbing somebody, or that he wanted to lick the blood off the blade. He also had threatened her with that knife. And she also says, I warned people a long time ago that they did not want to open up Carmelo's history, but you pushed for it, and this is what you get. She said, I know from my multiple sources that there is so much more behavior and even more text messages on his phone that go back years. So get ready, because we are about to learn just how disturbed Carmelo Anthony is. I think he's probably going to get a new trial. Well, I mean, obviously, he is going to get his case appealed, and the state is going to present even more evidence against him. But this boy, yeah, now a man, is obviously in the right place. He does not deserve to be living in society. The only shame here is that he was only sentenced to 35 years. He should have received life in prison. And of course, I think that they couldn't go for the death penalty because he was a minor at the time that he actually committed the crime. But either way, Carmelo Anthony is going to spend a good portion of his life in prison. All right. Let me say thank you to Filter Dog. Rumble admitted that they are still having problems with Rumble Studio. Thank you. I assume so. Okay, so the story here is that in 2018, Democrat Javier Becerra, who was, of course, working in California state government in 2018, he identified problems from the 2016 election. Now, this is not something that he wants to talk about right now, because the findings that they made in 2018 back up the release that President Trump and the White House recently revealed through the declassified intelligence and government reports, which covered the vulnerabilities in our voting systems. Of course, China's acquisition of American voter data, the investigations into improper voter registrations, non-citizens on the voter rolls, all of these things come together to paint a fairly clear picture that the American electoral system is hopelessly broken. And as long as we are voting under a system that is inherently flawed and broken from the start, nobody is going to feel comfortable with the results that we get out of it. It's still something that we question, even if a candidate that, you know, we happen to like was elected. So the files that were released by the White House identify centralized repositories, voter registration databases, poll books, and election websites as the systems that are most vulnerable to exploitation. And the White House Task Force released the March 2020 email alleging that a national security advisor official had resisted sharing election intelligence, which involved 2016 and 2020, because they didn't want to appear to be deep state. Now, also, Todd Blanche, currently carrying forward the Justice Department's fight for unredacted statewide voter registration records, and that includes California's. The DOJ sought the full electronic list that would have included names, birth dates, residential address, state driver's license numbers, or the last four of Social Security numbers. That would allow them to test California's compliance with federal voter list maintenance laws. Now, of course, California, one of the states that refused, they sued the DOJ. A federal judge dismissed the California case in January, and the DOJ appealed to the Ninth Circuit, and Todd Blanche now says the Supreme Court review remains a possibility in this broader fight to gain access to election rolls. But the national question is no longer whether the warnings existed back in 2016, 2018. They did. The question that we have, and the only question we need to be asking, is who exactly knew? Who acted on that information? Who took advantage of those vulnerabilities? Why do they still refuse to hand over the full and complete record? So we can look at California, because Xavier Becerra wants to become the governor of the state of California. Now, back in July 23rd, 2018, while he was the attorney general, he joined up with 20 other state attorneys general in warning Congress that hackers had targeted state and local election boards, and that they had invaded a state election website, and that they had stolen the personal information of approximately 500,000 voters, and that they had infiltrated a company that supplied voting software. Now, this letter described, quote, technologically vulnerable election infrastructure and demanded comprehensive security risk assessments. Now, Becerra signed it along with these other 20 attorney generals. And of course, because he signed it and he put his name on the claim that all of these things had happened, which is essentially what President Trump and the White House task force had happened all over the country, it's very difficult to ignore it. But that's not going to stop them from trying to ignore it. California had identified and documented attacks in the exact same sphere of influence that President Trump has just admitted to the entirety of the United States. And the White House election integrity release includes a federal report that places Riverside County in California in their history of voter registration system breaches. Now, that report says a bad actor used California's voter registration website and the personal identifying information of voters to change their party affiliations without their knowledge or consent. Now, the new federal file places Riverside in the history of voter registration system breaches, and Xavier Becerra's signature proves that he personally acknowledged that this threat existed all the way back in 2018. Now, Alex Padilla's record shows what California did next, and Sacramento shows what remained unfinished as 2020 rolled around and another election was upon us. California's record tracks several of the warnings that were heeded at that time. There was an abused state registration portal in Riverside County, a contractor-built statewide infrastructure in their software, VoteCal, administrative change orders, and delayed security assessments. You can read the letter yourself. It's 4 pages. You've got 2 text pages and then 2 additional pages with all of the signatures. But the 2 text pages, which includes the page bearing the signature of Xavier Becerra, is right here. And the complete 4-page letter is available as well. Now, they say here, this is coming from the stationery of the state of New Mexico. But dear honorable committee members, the undersigned attorneys general write to express our grave concern over the threat to the integrity of the American election system. It's so funny to go back because, of course, if we had made a claim like this, obviously we were considered to be conspiracy theorists. These are baseless claims being made. Anyways, they talk about the 2016 election, hackers and Russian military intelligence, how state and local election boards were targeted, successful invasion of state election websites, stealing of personal identifying information of 500,000 American voters, infiltrating of company-supplied software across the United States, on and on and on. This is very important. And the fact that they knew about it and they only raised awareness when President Trump was in power, because, of course, they were probably worried about the midterms. They had to say something about it. So how this all went down is during California's June 7th, 2016 presidential primary, voters in Riverside County showed up to vote, and they discovered that their party affiliations had somehow been changed through the online registration portal. They obviously didn't do it. It was the Chinese bad actors, or perhaps other nations acting as bad actors, who did it for them. And the Riverside District Attorney, Michael Hestrin, said there were 20 formal complaints that were filed, and they believe there were probably far more voters that were affected. Now, at the time, investigators could not figure out who the bad actor was because the state, shockingly enough, did not collect the IP addresses of visitors who went to the website or logged in through the back end. And KQED reported that the investigation ended at the office of then California Secretary of State Alex Padilla. California just proceeded business as usual. They didn't pause the election on September 26th, 2016, 111 days after the primary. Padilla still certified VoteCal as California's official voter registration system, and he connected all 58 counties to it. And then Padilla announced that VoteCal had passed security audits, accuracy testing, and simulation election performance review. How is that possible? if all of these known offenses had taken place. So Padilla's office denied evidence of this breach of the voter registration database. And his defense of the product as somehow certified brings us a number of additional questions. Now, there was an investigation, and they found that someone had used the state's legitimate online workflow and the identities of voters in the state of California to change these official party affiliations. Now, we don't know exactly how the database was breached, though. We don't know if it happened through the public portal. We don't know if they came in through the back end. All of the official records were changed, and there was no real evidence to track down because they didn't capture all of those IP addresses. It would have been very helpful if they had. But an official VoteCal specification does reveal that there was another decision that the public was never explained why it was made. So the revision history of VoteCal states that on May 15th, 2015, the project removed voter activity from the sync check process as per change request 14. So the underlying change request is not actually included in the records, and the public document doesn't identify the complete effect of that change or explain who authorized it or tell us really what happened with that change being made. Later sections still identify voter registration and voter participation history and images as synchronization categories, but it doesn't make change 14 requests disappear. It makes the missing documents of why and how and when it happened a lot more important. That same final specification also says that county service account passwords were initially not set to not expire, and it permitted the project team to conditionally accept the specification with outstanding deficiencies it considered non-material. And the public approval page names the VoteCal project sponsor, but it displays a blank signature line. So there was no request from the legislature in terms of this change request, and it never voted to use non-expiring service account passwords. They just kind of did it either because they were lazy or because they wanted the system to be accessed. It also did not decide which deficiencies were non-material. Those were administrative, and all of the project decisions were handled by Alex Padilla's department and their contractor. So the legislature did pass AB 1461. This was the motor voter law. It did not order then Secretary of State Alex Padilla, the DMV, and the Jerry Brown administration, because that was who was governor at the time, to launch it until April 2018 before the June primary. So the county election officials said that they were warning Padilla personally that the system was not ready for prime time. Los Angeles County Registrar Dean Logan said he raised concerns directly with Padilla, and instead of voicing instead of heeding those concerns that were voiced to them, California moved ahead with the changes, and now we've had these breaches. So there was an investigation by the Los Angeles Times. They based it on approximately 1,300 pages of state records that were produced through FOIA request. 6 days before they launched the system, state security officials saw the DMV network attempting to connect to servers in Croatia. That's interesting. Why would the California state DMV system need to connect to servers in Croatia? There was also a senior programmer who warned of a possible international incident and major security and launch failures. 3 months of testing on this product had instead been condensed down to roughly 6 weeks. The design and testing of the product were occurring at the exact same time. They clearly were not ready, and personal information would sometimes remain visible on DMV touchscreens between customers. And then you have these errors in the voter file. There was an official Los Angeles County report that summarized letters sent by the DMV and the California Department of Technology to the Secretary's office, Padilla's office. About 23,000 customers may have had their records mixed together. So they transmitted incorrect political parties, language, and vote-by-mail preferences. With approximately 1,500 additional customers may have been registered to vote in error, and some people who chose to opt out still had their information sent to the Secretary of State to get registered. Padilla, of course, said the failures were completely unacceptable, but instead of stopping, instead of fixing them, they just forged ahead anyways. It was, again, not a decision by the legislature, but an administrative decision. And at this time, Xavier Becerra was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives while the Riverside incident took place, and Secretary of State Alex Padilla was implementing the Vote Cal certification. So then Becerra became California Attorney General in January of 2017. And in July of 2018, as the Attorney General, Becerra signs this letter that we began this strange, sordid tale with, where he identified the stolen voter data, the penetrated state election websites, the compromised software suppliers, and numerous direct threats to the safety and security of California elections. In November of 2019, the DMV notified roughly 3,200 California voters that 7 outside government entities had improperly accessed information about whether a license holder had a Social Security number or verified Social Security card over the course of 4 years. Now, there's a law in California, Civil Code 1798.29, and it requires a state agency must notify more than 500 California residents because of a single breach to submit a sample notice electronically to the Attorney General. And the DMV described one 4-year access control failure. They mailed notices to roughly those 3,200 people. If the DMV had treated this failure as a single breach, as they described it in the public notice, the Department of Justice should have received the sample, but the public file never should have gone with it. And in August of this year, August 19th, we found a search of the DOJ's public breach notice database under the agency's name never had an entry for the 2019 DMV breach. The search result does not prove that no one had submitted it. It's a reason to demand a receipt, to review the record, and to investigate the file. And it has to be asked, did the DOJ ever get notice that these security breaches had happened? If it did get a notice of it, was there ever an investigation? Were there specific records to it hidden somewhere in the Trump 1 DOJ? We don't know. But we can tell you this, the elections in California are 100% not safe and secure. And so the efforts that are currently being undertaken to secure them at the federal level are more important than ever. All right. Now, Act Blue co-founder Matt Burgalis was scheduled to testify today behind closed doors for Jim Jordan and his committee. And much like the other Act Blue executive that testified publicly, he chose to plead the fifth. Also very similar to Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, this closed-door deposition with the House committee earlier today was as a result of the investigation into Act Blue accepting foreign donations that are used, of course, to infiltrate U.S. politics on behalf of Democrats. The concept of smurfing is largely due to Act Blue's influx of improper donations, and many of them coming from foreign sources. So Jim Jordan brought Mr. Burgalis into the committee and asked him a number of questions, and Burgalis would not answer any of them. Jim Jordan asked, your board chairman said Act Blue accepted up to 38 million contributions in 2024 that had signs of foreign origin. How much fraud is too much fraud, he asked. And he responded, on the advice of my counsel, I respectfully decline to answer the questions pursuant to my Fifth Amendment rights under the Constitution. So Jordan then asks, how many foreign contributions did Act Blue accept? Once again, plead the fifth. Jordan then asks, how much money did Act Blue accept from Russia? Once again, pleads the fifth. Jordan asks, why did your entire legal team quit? Your in-house legal team. Once again, pleads the fifth. Jordan asks, did your legal team quit because of reduced fraud standards? And then he once again pleads the fifth. Jordan says, we won't keep you here all day, but let me just do one more. Did you weaken your fraud standards to help Democrats? And of course, he pleads the fifth. It is exactly like what the other representative of Act Blue did, Miss Wallace Jones, the chief executive officer of Act Blue. It seems that no one left at Act Blue is willing to speak up and answer any questions about what they're doing. Now, Act Blue is currently under investigation by the Department of Justice, and frankly, this is the smartest thing legally that they could do. However, it's not doing them any favors, and it definitely highlights the need for an aggressive prosecution of both of these individuals and anyone else still employed at Act Blue. Let's just, since we didn't have him on audio or video, let's just hear her pleading the fifth back in June.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer the question pursuant to my Fifth Amendment rights under the Constitution.
How many foreign contributions did Act Blue accept?
Yes. I don't know that there's anybody left at Act Blue to come in and testify. I mean, basically everybody in their executive teams quit. I would hope that as a result of the federal investigation, the Department of Justice might have reached out to and interviewed some of those people who left the organization to see if it's possible to get them to testify for the government. Now, let us jump over to Jocelyn Benson and Michigan. So, as we have shown on so many different occasions, Jocelyn Benson is working overtime, not for the people of Michigan, certainly not for the people of America. She is working overtime to protect herself and to delete and scrub as much evidence related to the fake elections in the state of Michigan as she possibly can. Now, the people of the state of Michigan had put together a ballot initiative, which essentially would have required proof of U.S. citizenship and required photo ID to vote in the state of Michigan. However, Jocelyn Benson and her cronies in the state government have essentially killed this citizen-led ballot initiative. This was done by a group called Americans for Citizen Voting Michigan, and they submitted signatures to get this constitutional amendment added to the ballot for November. They put together 709,841 signatures across the entire state. Michigan voters who supported this proposed amendment. That was more than 236,000 above the 446,198 signatures that were required. But here's where they got them. The Michigan Bureau of Elections, which of course operates under Jocelyn Benson, the Michigan Secretary of State and current candidate for governor of Michigan, is now recommending that the petition be declared insufficient. So the recommendation is based on a statistical review. You see, they reviewed 1,000 randomly selected signatures from the 709,000 that were submitted. And according to the Bureau's official 13-page staff report, election workers initially determined that 692 of the 1,000 sampled signatures were valid, which means that, you've got roughly 300 or so that would have been invalid. That's crazy to me. In the state of Michigan, you can basically cast a ballot no matter what. But that number would have been more than enough for certification, even if we say 30% of the signatures out of the nearly 710,000 are insufficient. They would still have enough signatures to get this certified to have it on the ballot. So there was a challenge filed by attorney Robert LeBrant and a left-wing voting organization called Promote the Vote Action. And this organization challenged 377 signatures in that original 1,000 signature sample. And of those, 217 have already been rejected by the Bureau's initial review, which leaves the challenge against the other 160 signatures the staff originally had considered valid. So after they processed those challenges, the number of accepted signatures plunged from 692 to 607. The campaign responded with evidence seeking to restore 149 signatures, but the Bureau staff did not allow that to happen. They only allowed for 5 of those signatures to be reinstated. So the final count was 612 valid signatures. In order to use this as a statistical model for all of the signatures, the campaign would have needed 629 signatures. So they are 17 signatures short of what they need to get this on the ballot in November. That means the fate of a statewide constitutional amendment that was supported by more than 700,000 Michigan voters would come down to how bureaucrats treated these 17 signatures in a sample of only 1,000. Based on that sample, the Bureau estimated the petition contained 434,423 valid signatures, which is 11,775 below the required total of 446,198. The Bureau therefore recommended that the Board of State Canvassers declare the petition as insufficient. In other words, officials did not individually determine that the campaign lacked the required 446,000 signatures. They projected a likely conclusion across the entire petition by using a sample that represented less than 1% of the total signatures submitted. This is the worst example of scheming, deep state, Democrat-style cheating that I can possibly imagine. So they have effectively killed the strongest election integrity measure in the state of Michigan in its history by not allowing it to even be on the ballot, because, of course, it would be too dangerous to them if people did decide that they wanted the voters in Michigan to show their photo ID when they voted. So Democrat staffers and their allies used this tiny sample. They nitpicked it. They invalidated signatures. They used technicalities because people wrote city when it was actually a township, or township when it was actually a city. They said that there were issues with dates, illegible handwriting. Come on. Illegible handwriting, circular information. They declared the whole thing dead. Our petitions were submitted more than 4 months before the deadline, and yet here we are at the last minute being told that they should not be certified. The treasurer for the organization that put this entire thing together. We spent months reviewing these petitions, removing duplicates, discarding signatures we believed might not comply with Michigan law. We are confident we submitted significantly more than the 446,198 valid signatures required. Americans for Citizen Voting Michigan spokesperson Kristen Combs vowed the campaign will continue fighting. The fight continues. More than 700 Michiganders signed our petition. They deserve a vote. So this proposed amendment would have required voters to prove their citizenship using documents like a passport or a birth certificate. It would have mandated the use of photo ID, or provisional ballots would then be cast with follow-up information. It also created a statewide citizenship verification program, and it ordered the removal of non-citizens from the qualified voter file after notice and a response window. It also included a state-funded hardship program for people who could not afford those documents. It wouldn't start until after the 2026 election, but unverified citizenship would then have blocked counting of ballots unless that documentation was promptly provided. So the petition is not formally being rejected yet, but it's close. Michigan's 4-member Board of State Canvassers, which is made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, are scheduled to make a final determination on August 24th, which is just a couple of days away. And the controversy, of course, comes in the midst of Michigan's election system facing mounting scrutiny over non-citizens allegedly registering to vote and counting ballots. Democrat Attorney General Dana Nessel, under pressure, likely from reporting like this, has recently charged 5 non-citizens that were accused of illegally registering and voting in the 2024 election. There is a 6th defendant, a U.S. citizen, who was charged with allegedly registering her non-citizen husband. So we will see what happens, but it is not looking good. I don't even know what the citizens would do in the instance that the Board of Canvassers tells them that they can't use these signatures. I don't know if they can go to court over it, but we'll see what happens. All right. I have another sponsorship from our friends over on Rumble. Let me pull this up. Please do me a favor. Hit the like button. Help us out by sharing the show. We lost a bunch of people when I had to bounce over to the new stream, but I'm sure you guys hear a lot about crypto. I know I do. There is a very important part that many people miss, and that is that crypto was created so that you could actually own and control your own money. Because after the 2008 financial crisis, Bitcoin was made and designed as an alternative to banks. Instead of a bank holding on to your money, delaying transfers, limiting access, it puts you in control of your money. And if you've ever had to wait for a transfer to clear, you have felt that problem. Fast forward to today, everybody's heard about crypto, but getting started might feel a little bit complicated. And that's exactly why I use Rumble Wallet, because it takes all of that complexity and it makes it very simple. You choose what you want to use: Bitcoin, dollar-backed stablecoin, even digital gold backed by real gold. It's not complicated to set up. It connects directly with MoonPay, so you right away use your debit card, your credit card, your bank account. You're up and running in just a few minutes. And then once you get set up, you can even support your favorite Rumble creators, whether it's me or other people on the platform. So if you're on Rumble, do this right now. Scan that QR code or click the link in the description. If you're off Rumble, go to wallet.rumble.com. And from there, you can set up the wallet, tap buy, and you're in the game. And then in just a few minutes, you go from hearing about crypto to actually owning some. Also, when you support myself or other people on Rumble, the bulk of that donation goes directly to them. And of course, it's in crypto. So you keep it in crypto and it continues to go up. I think Bitcoin was back up to 72 grand earlier today. I kind of just want to check that right now because that makes a difference. Yeah, Bitcoin is currently at $72,693 and change. And Ethereum is back up to 2,300. XRP is at 126, about 50%, slightly less than 50% of its high. All right, so let's jump on back over to the courts and elections. The Seventh Circuit Court, a 3-judge federal appeals panel, has just handed Wisconsin election officials a major victory yesterday. What they've done is upheld the state's special exemption from the National Voter Registration Act and leaving their costly voter roll access system intact. This came as a result of a 27-page ruling where the Seventh Circuit affirmed the dismissal of an election transparency lawsuit brought by the Public Interest Legal Foundation that was filed against the Wisconsin Elections Commission Administrator, Megan Wolf. So the ruling came from a panel composed entirely of Republican judges. You have Trump-appointed Judge Michael Brennan, Reagan-appointed Judge Frank Easterbrook, and Bush-appointed Senior Judge Diane Sykes. She actually wrote the opinion. The issue here was an extraordinary exemption written into the 1993 National Voter Registration Act. Federal law does not apply to states that have continuously permitted same-day polling place registration or required no voter registration at all since August 1st of 1994. And Wisconsin specifically qualifies because it has offered same-day registration throughout that period in question. North Dakota, Idaho, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Wyoming are also exempt in this way. So the Public Interest Legal Foundation, which is an election integrity watchdog, requested Wisconsin's statewide voter registration list in January of 2024. They sought access under the National Voter Registration Act, which ordinarily requires covered states to make records concerning voter roll maintenance available for public inspection and copying at a reasonable cost. However, Wisconsin officials invoked the state's exemption and processed the request under state law instead. So Wisconsin state law permits election officials to redact voters' protected birth information and to charge for electronic voter records. The fee begins at a reasonable $25 and increases based on the number of records requested until it reaches an astonishing maximum of $12,500. Now, because the statewide file contains millions of voter records, the organization was hit with the maximum price of $12,500. Now, the Public Interest Legal Foundation challenged not only the massive fee and the withheld birth information, but they argued that Wisconsin's exemption violated the constitutional principle of equal state sovereignty, which is recognized by the Supreme Court in Shelby County versus Holder. They also argued the exemption failed the congruence and proportionality test governing certain laws enacted under the 14th Amendment. And the Seventh Circuit Court rejected both arguments. So Judge Sykes wrote that Shelby County involved a federal law imposing extraordinary burdens on selected states based on decades-old information. Wisconsin's exemption does the opposite by relieving the state from federal regulation, and the exemption was concluded functions more like an equalizer, while the Public Interest Legal Foundation's requested outcome would turn Shelby County on its head. So PILF has repeatedly argued that the exemption no longer makes sense and that it shields election officials from the same public scrutiny that is required in the 44 states that do not have exemption. Birth date information is particularly useful for identifying potential duplicates, deceased registrants, or other maintenance issues that we tend to see in states that are run by Democrats. By charging the maximum fee of $12,500 and withholding that data, it makes independent verification a lot more difficult. So in other words, the court ruled that Congress can continue treating Wisconsin differently from most of the country because the state adopted the same-day polling place registration before the federal government's arbitrary cutoff date of 1994. So Chief Brennan argued that the outcome, Chief Judge Brennan agreed with the outcome, but wrote separately to raise an additional roadblock for the Public Interest Legal Foundation. Brennan suggested the election watchdog may lack standing 3 times over, arguing that it had not sufficiently demonstrated Wisconsin actually denied the requested information, that the alleged denial caused downstream harm, or that the PILF could assert the claimed injuries on their own behalf. He also stressed that the group had never paid the $12,500 fee and may have had alternative methods for obtaining at least some of the information under Wisconsin law. The decision is another disappointing blow to people and election integrity groups who are seeking to hold these states and their voter rolls accountable, attempting to examine the voter registration databases that are used to administer our elections. Now, Wisconsin argues that the $12,500 fee for their statewide voter file in some jurisdictions provides comparable information free or at a modest reproduction fee if you get it other ways. The earlier reporting had raised concerns about hidden characters inside the voter identification numbers that can cause separate records to appear identical when you process them with ordinary software. And the PILF had pursued litigation seeking the voter maintenance lists generated through the Electronic Registration Information System, or ERIC, as you may know it. That report, citing Wisconsin audit materials, noted that the state requested only 3 of a possible 216 ERIC reports during their first 4.5 years. So the Seventh Circuit did not determine whether or not Wisconsin voter rolls are accurate. They did not determine whether its redactions are necessary, and they did not determine whether or not the charging of the money serves the public interest. All they ruled on was that the decades-old federal exemption is constitutional, and that allows election officials to keep operating under a state system that forces watchdog groups like the Public Interest Legal Foundation to be forced to pay thousands of dollars before they can analyze the database that is being used to run the election. So all hope is not lost. There may be other ways to go about getting this information. Now, Harmeet Dillon is appearing because she is part of the DOJ, and the Civil Rights Division is preparing to go to thousands of locations around the country, and she is going to be overseeing the efforts to ensure that non-citizens do not vote in the general election. But I think that as long as these states have non-citizens on the rolls, they are going to be casting ballots. She pointed out that the DOJ is not the only game in town. It is not the only piece of the puzzle. And she said there's actually other agencies, not only at the federal level, but also at the state level, that are working with them to ensure that non-citizens don't end up voting. But again, I think we know that non-citizens are voting, And I think we actually want those non-citizens to vote so that the state officials who are allowing it can have charges filed against them.
All right, so let's bring in the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the DOJ, Harmeet Dillon. Harmeet, always good to see you. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
We can certainly...
She's looking tired lately. I feel like she's not getting enough sleep.
See you and the new Attorney General Todd Blanche restoring law and order at the DOJ, much different than the Biden days. But you have these DSA candidates like Angie Nixon. She wins the Democrat nomination for Senate last night in Florida. She wants to defund the police, as you know, abolish some prisons, punish ICE agents. Does that stand a chance of victory in a general election? I get that she won the primary. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, Ed, in my role at the Department of Justice, it's a nonpartisan role. And so I don't really involve myself in politics. But, I was a member of the Republican National Committee for 8 years. And I think you could infer from that, and based on my public statements before I took this job, what I think about communists running for office in our country. From our point of view, we're going to continue to make sure at the Department of Justice that we have free and fair elections and that people trust the outcomes of those elections.
Yeah, I want to get to that. But from a nonpartisan standpoint, if we eliminate the police and the prisons, does the DOJ believe America will be more or less safe?
That's an easy one to answer.
Well, I think common sense, all of us who live here in the district, for example, I was, struck by how this is actually the safest city I've ever lived in my life. And that's thanks to the presence of the National Guard and strong policing and great law enforcement by our U.S. Attorney, Jeanine Pirro. And where you don't have that, and I've lived in San Francisco, I've lived in New York City, I've lived in London, you have a lot of fear. I mean, I don't feel comfortable. I travel a lot for my job. I don't feel comfortable, and the U.S. Marshals don't feel comfortable with me walking around some of America's cities. And I think that is really instructive. And at
Wow.
D.C., I do feel very safe here.
That's a dramatic statement for somebody working at the DOJ with the U.S. Marshals in tow. You mentioned election integrity. I know this was a priority for you before you were at the DOJ. I knew you then. You're planning now to send 1,000 election observers to monitor voting activities during the midterm. Some people are skeptical about that. We're running a poll right now on our X account, and people are worried that that still may not be enough. What other measures might you take to ensure security if the Save America Act does not pass?
Here's the thing. Save America Act is not going to pass. The Senate has already made that clear. And even if they did, by some miracle of God, get it passed before the midterms in November, there is not enough time to even implement it. And of course, the states that are withholding their voter rolls right now, they're going to challenge it in court. I am certain of it. So I think that the DOJ and Harmeet, certainly the administration, they are well aware of just how important and dire the circumstances are. And I've heard other people say that 1,000 election monitors, even though it's more than have ever been sent in the past, that's not enough. But I think that the really key part here is that it's not only the DOJ that are taking part in this. And that's really what I want to hear Harmeet say.
Well, the Save America Act is, again, in politics, it's independent. I think Congress needs to do a lot of things to fix our voting laws, and I've testified about that before I took this job. But I think people need to remember that we are not the election police. We are enforcing our federal civil rights laws, including numerous federal election statutes, but we are only a small portion of the monitoring effort. Before I took this job, I was an election monitor for candidates and for parties, and that effort is ongoing as well. And I understand that there's a strong effort to send monitors, official monitors from the Senate and the House, and that happens on a bipartisan basis. So there are actually thousands of eyes and ears out there from both parties, and people who've been contacting me saying, how can I be part of your DOJ effort? Well, you can't, but you certainly can call your county, whatever party you're in, and volunteer and get out there and do this. My mom did this in rural North Carolina when I was a kid, and I'm doing it today on behalf of the United States. And so we're really proud of the people who step up. It's important that we have eyes and ears on our voting and on the tabulation. And unfortunately, it goes on forever in some states like California. So that needs shifts of people to do that work.
I imagine you've had eyes and ears on some of these videos emerging from Minnesota, the far left.
Yes, here we are. I cannot wait to see what the opinion of the DOJ is on that.
group CARE is calling for now a criminal probe of independent journalists who have exposed the fact that if you go in with a burqa and you pretend to be a Muslim voter and you don't have ID in Minnesota, you can go ahead and vote. And they say that you could vouch for up to 8 other unregistered individuals. We have a video about that. I want to play that and get your reaction.
Okay, we don't need to watch that again.
If they live there in Minnesota, it's okay. How is this happening in America?
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, one's political views are not necessarily relevant to whether you're a qualified voter. Citizenship is relevant to that. I think the bigger problem in what you saw in that video is Minnesota's vouching system, which is something that the Department of Justice has actually been challenging dating back to January of this year when I sent a letter to the Secretary of State over there. I don't think that this procedure is compliant with the Help America Vote Act and potentially other federal civil rights statutes. And so, timing of taking action on these issues is a, litigation decision. And so I can't comment on what may happen with that. But I think that that procedure is definitely highly questionable. But people also need to know that the Civil Rights Division before this Trump administration was effectively going after states and localities that were trying to require voter ID and trying to make it better and more fair to vote. And that needs to change. It has changed under this administration. We actually support that, but eventually Congress is going to need to make.
All right. So I've got some stuff that I can't talk about. All right. When I am discussing the efforts of the administration behind the scenes, I can talk about what we see publicly. And then there are other things happening that I know about, okay, that I can't tell you guys what they are. But I would urge you to take a look at some of the interviews that I've done with election integrity experts, people like Andrew Paquette, people like my friend Ed Solomon. I would urge you to look at those interviews and the things that they have discovered and the efforts that they have gone to try to bring that to the attention of people who matter. And that's all I will say about that. But I would just keep your eyes and ears open about those things. Now, this week in Florida, we had another win, an upset, if you will. There was a judge in Miami-Dade, Judge Mayvel Ruiz, who had, yes, Judge Mayvel Ruiz was a judge in Miami-Dade. And she had, for some time, been attempting to stop President Trump from installing his presidential library in Miami-Dade after his term is over. Now, she was a horrible, horrible woman. TDS suffering, diagnosed with brain worms, and she had blocked the transfer of this Miami-Dade property for the president to install his presidential library. Now, she was just beaten by a much younger woman, Destiny Ruiz, 30-year-old conservative attorney Destiny Ruiz, in the election on Tuesday. And this was for the 11th Judicial Circuit Group 67 seat. There were 767 precincts. Alvarez received 113,215 votes, 50.46%. Ruiz received 111,142 votes, 49.54%. So she was defeated by just 2,073 votes, and she needed to get that 50% threshold to avoid a November runoff. So Ruiz is no longer going to be a judge. In 2025, she had issued that temporary injunction blocking Miami-Dade College from transferring the 2.63-acre site to the owners who were now going to build the Freedom Tower for the library project. And there was a lawsuit brought by a left-wing activist by the name of Marvin Dunn. He had sued the college and alleged the Board of Trustees failed to provide sufficient public notice before approving the transfer under Florida's Sunshine Law. So this was some pretty valuable property. It was appraised at about $67 million. Ruiz later dismissed Dunn's complaint after the college held another public notice meeting and voted again unanimously for the transfer a second time. But the judge then claimed her decisions were based strictly on the law and were not political. But of course, people did not like that she had stepped in at all. So this essentially soured her in the minds of local voters. And now she will be replaced by Miss Alvarez. Ruiz has been recommended by a number of left-wing organizations, the Miami Beach Democratic Club and the Miami Beach Democratic Socialists of America, whereas Miss Alvarez was backed by the Miami-Dade Fraternal Order of Police, the Police Benevolent Association, the Hialeah Police Officers Association, the South Florida Council of Firefighters, and she also had previously served as a Florida gubernatorial fellow, and she's also the managing partner of the Miami-Dade office of Goad, DeBest, and Cross. She got her law degree and undergraduate economics degree from the University of Florida. Governor DeSantis and the Florida cabinet unanimously had approved that parcel for the library in September of last year. Eric Trump said the future library will be an icon on Miami's skyline, and of course, it will honor President Trump's 45th and 47th presidential legacy. The site location beside the Freedom Tower has powerful symbolism as well. There was a landmark that once served as a processing center for Cuban refugees who had come to the United States, escaping the horrors of communism. So she is done. Oh, okay. All right. Time for the main event, you guys. First of all, we need to talk about the updates in the case of Jim Comey, United States v. Jim Comey. So, from these new filings, we learned that the Secret Service got involved in the James Comey threat case after a Emerald Isle cop from North Carolina notified his police chief that James Comey, who was at that time a guest on the island, had posted this apparent threat against President Trump. Now, of course, Comey initially refused to cooperate with the Secret Service. He refused to allow the Secret Service into his beach home to be interviewed, and he refused to even give the Secret Service the address of where he was staying so that they could come and see him. And the Secret Service determined that this 8647 formation of seashells on the beach was found just a few miles away from where they later determined that Comey was staying. Now, federal prosecutors have also unequivocally said there is no doubt that James Comey and the story that he stumbled across this 8647 seashell formation on the beach is located behind a sand dune in a spot that beachcombers, people just walking down the beach, would not be easily able to discover them. It's a spot that you would have intentionally needed to try to go to. There's also no evidence that exists anywhere on anybody's phone or in terms of anybody coming forward to suggest that it was anybody but James Comey and maybe his wife who had arranged and photographed or had ever even seen these seashells. It was a fairly remote location. Now, the DOJ says that 100% they believe that James Comey posted this picture after creating this image himself. There is no one else likely to have made this 8647 formation. So these new court filings were brought to light on Tuesday. Dispute that the Instagram photo of the shells could be understood as anything other than a threat against President Trump. Prosecutors also in the Eastern District of North Carolina urged a judge not to dismiss the case because James Comey is trying to have it thrown out. They say, if there is any doubt, let a jury decide. Put the evidence before a jury and have a jury of James Comey's peers decide whether or not he made an intentional threat against the life of the President of the United States. Now, it should be the jury, not the court. If the judge dismisses the case, then the judge is denying the people their justice. It is them who should decide whether or not this post from May of 2025 was a true threat or not. If it is not a threat, then the people sitting on that jury will determine that. So the issue presented is who should answer this true threats question. Comey wants to take that question away from the jury before the government presents any evidence or even allegations set forth in the theory of the case. No authority supports his attempt to shortcut these proceedings. So the filings represent the government's most detailed explanation to date on this indictment. And they have come in response to James Comey's motion to seek dismissal on grounds that include vindictive prosecution and claiming that the post did not amount to a true threat. Now, this is the really interesting part, and we had speculated on this at the time because the government, in their indictment, had suggested that they wanted to seize all of the proceeds of James Comey's book, and he's written a number of books. But the government invoked one book in particular, Comey's crime novel, which is called FDR Drive. This is the one that came out just a couple of days after he made this 8647 post. And they say the evidence in this book bolster their case. Now, let me say here, they claim that the novel itself is compelling in establishing mens rea, which is Latin for guilty mind, because it depicts conduct that is similar to a not-so-subtle call for violence against President Trump, as it is alleged in the case made by the government. So the government describes in their filings that the book centers on a, quote, far-right-wing media personality whose foes are killed after he singled out his enemies by name and suggesting that something should be done about them. On May 15th, 2025, a charismatic leader named James Comey, through the wonder of the internet, posted a coded message to his followers, meaning kill or get rid of President Trump. That is from the government's filing. Now, prosecutors also questioned James Comey's account that he found the seashells already arranged when he was walking down the beach, suggesting the post was an effort to generate attention for the forthcoming novel. And we have evidence to support that as well, because James Comey and his, this is the one here. Text messages obtained by federal investigators revealed James Comey bragging about his book to his agent, and he's talking about the 8647 post going viral on social media, and he says, it's not a big deal. I'll be okay if it sells the book. Comey's agents, by the way, are Keith Urban and Matt Latimer. They also repped the anti-Trump anonymous author, which is Miles Taylor, and they ousted former Trump White House aide Victoria Coates. So prosecutors questioned whether or not it was Jim Comey who posted it. Last week, it was revealed that there is evidence that Jim Comey's wife, Patrice, sent him a Google screenshot of a nonviolent definition of the term 86 2 minutes before he made that famous post on Instagram. That seemed to me, and I think it looks to the prosecution, as if Patrice was sending James Comey this picture as some sort of plausible deniability so that he could say, look, I looked it up on the internet, and this is totally not a threat. But there's also a reason why James Comey was trying to suppress that text message from being revealed during the course of this trial, because it's a little bit too on the nose. So this affidavit search warrant for the Comey presidential threat case reveals that his wife, Patrice, sent him the Google screenshot of this nonviolent definition just 2 minutes before he made the post on Instagram. And here is, of course, that famous post where James Comey says, cool shell formation on my beach walk. So earlier this year, the grand jury had decided that James Comey is indicted on 2 counts. 1, knowingly and willfully making a threat to take the life of and inflict great bodily harm upon the President of the United States. And count 2, knowingly and willfully did transmit in interstate and foreign commerce a communication that contained a threat to kill the president, Donald J. Trump. Comey is facing up to 20 years in prison. The fact that his behavior aligns so closely with the the plot of his book is obviously no mistake. I believe, and so does the government believes, that James Comey made this post with the express intention of putting this out into the ether and essentially putting it into the minds of people who would read it and then likely go and go after the president. There's a passage in the book that talks about the power of the internet and the power of social media and how you can make posts like this online and then people will take them and act on them. It's just so blatantly exactly what he did. Now, what's also interesting is that Comey and his lawyer initially refused to provide federal investigators the original photo that Comey took of that 8647 seashell threat against President Trump. And the reason they didn't want to turn it over is because it held metadata. With that metadata, they can determine the exact time, date, and physical location that the picture was taken. So the FBI had to get that photograph by serving Apple a search warrant to get into James Comey's iCloud. Undoubtedly, they might have found some other interesting things in that iCloud account. Now, another really crazy piece of information is that a James Comey family member, one of his relatives, sent a text message to his wife basically disavowing James Comey and telling Patrice and James that they are two of the most disgusting human beings to have ever existed. This came in the form of a new exhibit in the case against James Comey, where the family member basically lambastes them for creating this call to violence against President Trump. Now, the actual text of the message reads, "I have held my tongue for a long time, but I just can't do it anymore. You guys have really gone off the deep end over the years with your TDS. 8647 is a call for violence, no matter how you spin it. You should be ashamed of yourselves. I am thoroughly embarrassed I have ever defended the absolute coward that is your husband. You and Jim are some of the least accepting, most hypocritical people I have had the displeasure of knowing. I hope Jim goes to jail for his crimes." Based. I absolutely love seeing it. Can you imagine having done something like this and your own family is so disgusted with you that they text you and say, "You can quite literally get bent. I want nothing to do with you forever, and I want you to go to prison because you're such a disgusting human being." Absolutely love it. And I can't wait to hear what else other people have texted Jim Comey. I can't imagine that that's the only person in Jim Comey's life who said, "Son, you done effed up. You have really stepped in it." Thank you to Kenzie Fam, who says, "It's not crypto via Rumble wallet, but I do need to add my X card to Rumble." There you go. You know what? I have never announced this, but I believe that you can also send donations on X now using the X Money feature. If you have X Money, if I go to my, let me see, if I go to my profile, there's like a little dollar sign there now. And I have never received any donations through there, but I believe you can click that dollar sign and then donate using X Money if you have X Money, or maybe it's something else. But that's there as an option for people, because we do have like 360 people over there on X. All right, so James Comey is a certified piece of shit. We can definitely confirm that. You know who else is a certified piece of shit is none other than Eric Swalwell. Eric Swalwell is also in a really bad situation. So listen to this. Eric Swalwell, as we know, is currently under federal investigation for a number of claims of sexual assaults that have been made by women who worked for him in his office, other aides in Congress, perhaps women that he just met out at the bar. But a couple of days ago, he was flying into LAX, and surprisingly, he was confronted by FBI agents who were waiting for him when he got off the plane. This wasn't LAX. This is in San Francisco. So I don't know what airport that is. San Francisco airport on Saturday. So when they stopped him, they took all of his electronic devices. So that would be phone, laptop, iPad, anything that could be used for communications. And this is all part of the federal criminal investigation that they are running against him for that sexual misconduct. They also had a warrant for his home. So he was in San Francisco, but they went to his home in D.C. the next day, and they seized additional undisclosed potential evidence. Likely any other electronic devices. If he has a computer set up in his office, they would have taken that. Any computer that he would have used or would have had access to, they would have taken that. Any other phones, burners, or otherwise, they would have taken that. Of course, any records that could pertain to the sexual assaults, anything that could pertain to his communications, perhaps financial documents. The list of what they could have come in and taken is quite literally unlimited. Now, there's a couple of interesting things here. Obviously, he's not a congressman anymore, so his official government cell phone is no longer in his possession. That was handed back to the government when he left that position. I would imagine they're probably going to be looking on his personal devices, not only for communication specifically referencing these sexual assaults, but also to learn whether or not Eric Swalwell was running official business through any of his personal accounts, because that kind of seems to be the modus operandi of these people. They are either trying to avoid FOIA requests, or they are knowingly engaging in criminal activity, and so they use their personal accounts to have communications like that. The fact that, I just dropped my vape. The fact that they got him when he was stepping off the plane means that they wanted to catch him off guard. The other thing about getting him when he's coming off the plane could likely mean that the timing was because of certain communications that Eric Swalwell had been having. I believe that he would have been under surveillance. And so the nature of his communications, the people that he was communicating with, that would already be known to the FBI. And perhaps he had made a trip to settle an alibi, or to sort of craft a story about what he was doing. Maybe he was traveling to engage in some other illegal activity. And so they caught him at the airport when he wouldn't have had any time to cover anything up or delete anything, or basically cover his tracks. And the fact that they went and then searched his home in D.C. while he was in San Francisco, that also means that he would have had no power over what it was that they were looking at or taking, and it definitely would have caught him off guard. I don't know whether his wife and children were at home in D.C. when they searched the house. Don't know if any of their electronic devices would have been seized. But I think that this is undoubtedly the biggest indication we've had so far that the investigation against Eric Swalwell is pursuing full steam ahead. And it's only a matter of time before Eric Swalwell will be criminally indicted. Now, for what? Likely sexual assault. Other crimes related to his time in office? I certainly hope so. We've just learned, this is the other curious timing, is that they just released the Swalwell Fang file, and then several days later, they go and raid his house and they take all of his electronic devices. Eric Swalwell was bringing in Chinese spies and getting them planted in various offices in Congress. Eric Swalwell was engaging in a foreign money donation scheme that was totally illegal. Eric Swalwell was sleeping with a Chinese spy. Eric Swalwell is already known to be a leaker to the mainstream media. Was he also a leaker to the Chinese Communist Party? Was he giving confidential information to another nation? All of these things together paint a picture for me that makes me very, very excited. I think that Eric Swalwell is screwed, absolutely screwed. And we are very close to learning exactly just how screwed he is. Now, if we're talking about these sexual assaults, at least 4 females have come forward. Those are the ones who have made their statements public. That included a former staffer who said Swalwell raped her twice when she was too intoxicated to consent, once in 2019 and once again in 2024. Another woman claimed that Swalwell drugged her and raped her in 2018. Now, 2 of these women allege that he sent them unsolicited pictures of his privates. And this has been under investigation by the Department of Justice since April. He's also being investigated by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, Alvin Bragg, after another former staffer came forward to CNN and said that he raped her in California, or excuse me, the California Democrat raped her in 2024. Now, the unidentified former female staffer is the one who sat down with CNN and recounted some of the horrific details of the rape from 2024. She said, I went to the bathroom and I don't remember anything after that. She added that she sort of just remembered the next day. She said, I can see flashes of that evening of him on top of me, him pushing me pushing him off, him grabbing me. It was a lot more aggressive. It was very aggressive, she said, of the 2024 rape. And then news of the airport incident, of course, coincides with the Fang Fang investigation, where we learn that Fang Fang went to Eric Swalwell's apartment on multiple occasions. Eric Swalwell was already known to be a leaky ship. Eric Swalwell was receiving money from a People's Republic of China source. Eric Swalwell was setting up foreign spies to be made as aides in Congress. You know, I think that the government looks rather poorly on not only rapists, but rapists who drug their victims and then go back and do it again. So I am really excited about what's happening to Eric Swalwell. Patrick D 35 says, tornado just hit Dover, Delaware, a few miles from us. Oh, good Lord. Well, everybody keep Dover, Delaware in your prayers. That is awful. I'm sorry to hear that. All right. Eric, I can't wait to see what happens with your case. Also, finally, a friend of Eric Swalwell that we reported earlier this week is also under ethics investigation. Representative Jimmy Gomez, a Democrat, believe he's also from California. Jimmy Gomez is now accused of full-on sexual assault, not just sexual impropriety. So the House Ethics Committee was already probing Gomez for this sexual misconduct. Apparently, he was caught locking lips with a much younger congressional aide at a party in 2023. Now, because the investigation has expanded, we have found that another woman has officially accused the married Democrat of full-on sexual assault. This woman yesterday interviewed with the House Ethics Committee's investigation team, and she accused Jimmy Gomez of not only sexual harassment, but also sexual assault. And she also made a statement to the New York Post through her attorneys. Those attorneys directly challenged Gomez's public insistence that all of his extramarital affairs were consensual in nature. Well, your wife didn't have any consent to do with that. We represent one of the women who was interviewed by the House Committee on Ethics about her experience of sexual harassment and assault by Jimmy Gomez. Contrary to Representative Gomez's assertion in his statement, his actions were not consensual in nature with respect to our client. We fully expect that the House Committee on Ethics will come to the same conclusion in their investigation. And the lawyers went further, calling this episode the latest example of brazen sexual misconduct by a member of Congress, arguing that lawmakers appear to treat preying on young women working on Capitol Hill as one of the perks of the job. And Gomez has admitted to so-called personal mistakes outside of his marriage, but he insists that these mistakes were consensual in nature, and I haven't violated the law or House ethics rules. He says he's taken responsibility, he sought professional help, and he is fully cooperating with the Ethics Committee. Now, this bipartisan panel will review whether or not Gomez violated House rules and whether or not he brought unwelcome sexual advances towards younger employees in the House. And this, of course, is probably going to end the same way it ended for Eric Swalwell and for Tony, what's his name, from Texas. I'm sure that Gomez is not only facing criminal charges, but Gomez is definitely facing a change of career. So looking forward to seeing it. All right, before we finish up the show, I just have one final sponsor from our friends over here on Rumble. Take note of that QR code on screen. You guys, when protecting your wealth with precious metals, trust is everything. That's why investor Kevin O'Leary and thousands of smart buyers partner with Universal Coin and Bullion. led by Dr. Mike Fugens, America's gold expert, who was named the Dealer of the Year by the American Numismatic Association. Universal Coin and Bullion delivers unmatched credibility. To introduce you to their top-tier service, they are offering a 1/10 of an ounce gold American Eagle or 2 1-ounce silver American Eagles at their actual dealer cost. So don't wait. Claim your dealer cost gold and silver offer today by calling 1-800-UCB-COIN or click the link to buy now. Or you can use that QR code to go to the website directly. Thank you very much to UCB and thank you to Rumble. All right, you guys, final thank yous from over here on Pilled. Thank you to Filter Dog. Is taking Swalwell's electronics part of going after him or protecting DC insiders? It would be part of going after him. That is necessary for the investigation to go forward. Keeping in mind that Kash Patel is the director of the FBI, absolutely hates Eric Swalwell, knows exactly who he is, would have been fully aware that a warrant was being served to take all of Eric Swalwell's materials. Filter Dog, thank you for the cookie. Darla says, thank you, Zach. You've covered a lot of news. If you're able to show some gold-pilled love, absolutely. Thank you very much for the support over there, Darla. Thank you to everyone who supports whatever platform you're on. I really do appreciate it. And we're going to call it a day. I got to get some dinner. Good luck. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow right here, 5 p.m. for another episode of Red Pill News. Make sure you hit the like button on both shows. Make sure you help us out and share both of them as well. And hopefully Rumble Studio works flawlessly tomorrow. All right, guys. Peace. Principal Enigma asks, any news on Ruben Gallego? No news on Ruben Gallego other than the fact that he's out of a job. I don't think that as of now there are any criminal charges against him. Thank you, buddy.